A5.20 is all about addressing information security within supplier agreements. As we mentioned in 5.19, which you can go and watch separately, when it comes to suppliers, everything is connected. So don't treat 5.20, this control, as a standalone requirement. It's part of a gang that includes 5.19 supplier relationships, 5.21 ICT supply chain security, 5.22 monitoring and changes, and 5.23 cloud services. Together, these controls shout the same message. Write it down, agree it, and check in regularly. So what does the standard require? It states that relevant information security requirements shall be established and agreed with each supplier based on the type of supplier relationship. To put it simply, if they're supplying something and it affects your data or systems, you need to get it in writing. Why is it important? Well, I've already said several times in this, and I will be saying it again in other videos about suppliers. No organization is an island. You rely upon suppliers to provide services to you. But because suppliers often have access to your data and systems or premises, if there are no clear ground rules, then you're open to risk, potential data breaches. And again, I will simply say to you that you cannot outsource risk. So even though you may say, well, we don't manage our IT, so therefore it is the IT service provider. Well, it's still down to you to determine which IT provider you use and to set out clear rules of engagement. So what does these rules of engagement look like? What's in a good agreement? Now, I have to say at this point, you may need to, and I would advise you to, go and seek legal counsel to go and get an expert in drawing up contracts and agreements between you and your suppliers. Now, you don't need to be a solicitor to start on this journey, though, of course, as I've said, it does help if you are drawing up your contracts, or at the very least, to get them to look over your contracts to make sure that they have the necessary wording and controls. This is legal after all. These are legal binding agreements that you're signing up to. But they do need to include some essential things. So a good supplier agreement should spell out very clearly the roles and responsibilities on them, your expectations of them, any confidentiality clauses that you need to include, incident response and escalation processes, access control expectations, consequences of non-compliance, and finally, termination clauses. Now, it's not a one and done job. This is something that should have include regular reviews. So reviewing those contracts on a annual basis for some of the contracts will be fairly standard. For other contracts, you may want to have more regular checkpoints, maybe your IT provider. So making sure that service levels are being maintained or that any incidents are being handled in line with what's in the agreement. What does the auditor of ISO 27001 expect to see? Well, they're going to want to see supplier agreements in place, signed, for anyone with access to data and to your systems. They'll want to see that contracts include the information that I've already mentioned, and evidence of regular reviews as well is going to be required by them. Now, they won't be looking for glossy documents. They just want to see real proof. They'll want to see those agreements are in place. So what do you need to do? Well, you need to review your supplier agreements that you have in place. Go and speak to legal counsel if you need to have that, and make sure that everything is covered. If they're not, then make sure you update them with the information that I've already mentioned. You need to schedule your reviews. Make sure that they happen on a frequent basis, a semi-frequent basis, whatever period you feel is appropriate. It might be an annual review, it might be a quarterly review, but that can only be determined by your good selves. And make sure that these key clauses and review dates are captured within your supplier register, which we talked about previously. Now, we talked about this on the previous control, and it may be a good idea to add an extra column to that spreadsheet that we talked about there, where you add a column that talks about next review dates for that supplier. In terms of questions that we get asked, well, some of the questions that we get asked around this is, how do we make sure suppliers stick to the agreement? Well, you need to start by actually having one. So make sure that there are contracts in place. Then hold regular catch-ups. It's about building a relationship. Now, no one is talking about checking the T's and C's on every opportunity, but it is about making sure that everyone is fully aware of their responsibilities and their role within the relationship, because it is a relationship that you're building. If they're falling short, your agreement should spell out the consequences. How often should you review your agreements is a question that we get asked again quite regularly. Well, I've already said you should really be thinking about this in an appropriate manner to that relationship. Quarterly, annually, even biannually, as long as it is appropriate to that relationship and it makes sense to you as a business. Some higher risk suppliers you might need to meet even on a monthly basis, especially if they're handling sensitive data or infrastructure. Now, final thoughts around this one, because again, it's part of a whole host of other controls. I would simply say is you wouldn't rent out your house without a tenancy agreement. So why give suppliers the keys to your systems without having an appropriate agreement in place? Agreements protect everyone, you, your supplier, and your clients and customers. They set clear expectations and help you manage risk before they become incidents or issues whereby you then have to think about termination. So there you are. This is a control that is relatively easy to implement because you're going to, again, put this in place amongst other controls. But there you are with Annex A5.20, addressing information security within supplier agreements. We'll see you on the next control where we will continue this conversation.